They underestimated me. Simple as that. The mistress walked up to me at a charity gala and said, "It's over, Grace. Step aside with dignity." My husband's business partner smirked like I was already forgotten. But what none of them knew. I wasn't just a wife playing dress-up at corporate events. I was a forensic accountant who'd been building a case while they were building their lies. And I was about to show them what happens when you dismiss a black woman with a master's degree and access to your financials. Before I tell you how I turned their arrogance into their downfall, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that bell icon because this story is about to get good. And comment below if you've ever been in a room where people looked right through you like you didn't matter. This one's dedicated to every woman who's been treated as decoration when she's actually the foundation. My name is Grace Mitchell, and for 10 years, I lived what looked like a dream life from the outside. But here's what that dream was built on: my expertise. See, I didn't just stumble into forensic accounting. I earned my master's degree from Wharton, spent 3 years at the SEC investigating corporate fraud, and then moved to private sector consulting where I made my name catching what others missed. I'd exposed a $12 million Ponzi scheme at a tech startup, uncovered embezzlement at a non-profit where the executive director had been stealing for 7 years. My methodology was simple: observe, document, find the pattern. Numbers don't lie, people do. And I'd built a career on knowing the difference. That's why, 6 months before that gala humiliation, I noticed something that had nothing to do with affairs and everything to do with money. It started with David's monthly financial reports. I'd helped set up his accounting systems years ago, back when his company was just him and 5 employees working out of a cramped office. He'd given me full access to everything. Why wouldn't he? I was his wife. I designed the infrastructure. But now, reviewing the quarterly statements over coffee one Saturday morning, I saw expenses that didn't make sense. A $47,000 payment to a medical supply vendor I'd never heard of. Another $83,000 to a distribution consultant with a generic name, MedSupply Solutions LLC. When I cross-referenced the vendor database I'd built, neither company existed in our approved vendor list. I told myself it was nothing. New vendors. David expanding. Normal business growth. Except the numbers kept appearing. Every month, payments to obscure companies. Invoices that seemed inflated, $200 for supplies that should cost $50. Recurring charges to businesses I couldn't find online. Geographic inconsistencies too. A local medical supplier with a Nevada address when we operated primarily in the Northeast. The pattern recognition part of my brain, the part that made me good at my job, started firing on all cylinders. I did what I always do. I started documenting. Late nights in my home office while David was supposedly working late himself. I created spreadsheets tracking every suspicious transaction. Dates. Amounts. Vendor names. Payment methods. I logged into the company systems using the access credentials I'd had for years, pulling transaction records and matching them against inventory reports. That's when the discrepancies really jumped out. The numbers didn't just look wrong, they were wrong. Inventory that should have existed wasn't there. Cash flow moving in patterns designed to look legitimate but actually concealing something else. And then I noticed the timeline. Mabel had been hired 14 months ago as David's executive assistant. I pulled up the transaction history and filtered by date. The irregular payments had started 3 months after her arrival. Small at first, $10,000 here, $15,000 there. Then escalating. By month 6, we were looking at $100,000 monthly in questionable transactions. David's behavior shifted around the same time. More closed-door meetings with Marcus, his CFO and supposed best friend. More evasiveness when I asked casual questions about quarterly projections. More times I'd walk into a room and conversation would stop abruptly. I'd sit in on quarterly board meetings, as a courtesy, David said, since I'd helped build the financial foundation, and watch Marcus present numbers that contradicted what I was seeing in the actual accounts. The professional side of me knew what I was looking at. The wife in me didn't want to believe it. I spent weeks hoping I was wrong. Maybe I'd misread something. Maybe there was a legitimate explanation. Maybe my marriage wasn't built on lies and my husband wasn't a criminal. I couldn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not my colleagues, not my friends. How do you say, "I think my husband is committing fraud," without proof? How do you admit you're investigating your own spouse? But I couldn't stop. My commitment to truth had always been stronger than my need for comfort. So I kept digging. I expanded my search beyond routine transaction monitoring. I started looking at corporate registrations, tracing vendor addresses to their sources. That's when I found the shell companies, businesses that existed only on paper, registered to addresses that turned out to be mailbox stores or vacant lots. One night, when David was supposedly at a late meeting with investors, I went through his home office. My hands shook as I photographed documents I found in his locked drawer, the one he thought I didn't know the combination to. Offshore account paperwork. Wire transfer receipts. Communications between him, Marcus, and Mabel about restructuring payments. I created encrypted files on my personal laptop, backing up everything to a secure cloud drive. The evidence mounted until I couldn't deny what it meant. This wasn't accounting errors. This wasn't aggressive tax strategy. This was fraud. Systematic, deliberate, criminal fraud. And the man I'd loved for 10 years, the man I'd helped build an empire, was orchestrating it. With his best friend. And with the woman who would eventually stand in a ballroom and tell me my time was over. I sat in my home office at 2 a.m., looking at spreadsheets that represented 8 million reasons my marriage was a lie. I had a choice: confront David or keep investigating. I chose silence. I wasn't ready to show my hand. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. The annual Mitchell Pharmaceuticals charity gala was my responsibility. It had been for 8 years running. I'd secured sponsors, negotiated with vendors, coordinated every detail from the centerpieces to the keynote speaker. This year, we were raising money for children's hospitals across the state. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was organizing fundraisers while documenting fraud. My meticulous planning had made this event one of the most prestigious in the pharmaceutical industry. The guest list read like a who's who: major investors, board members, industry leaders, local media. Everyone who mattered would be there. Getting ready that night, I chose gold. A floor-length gown that made my brown skin glow, that commanded attention when I walked into a room. I paired it with the diamond earrings David had given me on our 5th anniversary, back when his gifts still meant something. Standing in front of the mirror, I looked perfect. Elegant. Poised. Everything a millionaire's wife should be. But inside, I felt hollow. I was wearing a mask, playing a role, and I wondered how much longer I could keep performing. The ballroom at the Ritz was exactly as I'd envisioned it. Crystal chandeliers. White orchid centerpieces. A string quartet playing near the entrance. Guests arrived in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, praising me for another flawless event. "Grace, you've outdone yourself. This is spectacular. How do you manage it every year?" I smiled, thanked them, played the gracious hostess. David barely acknowledged any of it. Barely acknowledged me. He was across the room with Mabel, laughing at something she'd said, his hand resting too casually on her lower back. I made my rounds. Networked with investors. Chatted with board members about quarterly projections. Performed the role I'd perfected over 10 years. All the while, I was watching. David's cold indifference at our dinner table. Marcus watching me with barely concealed contempt, like I was an obstacle he couldn't wait to remove. Mabel's confident body language around my husband, touching his arm, leaning in too close, acting like she already owned what was mine. I felt it before it happened. That shift in energy when something's about to go very wrong. Mabel stood up from her table and walked toward ours. Deliberately. Purposefully. The room's energy shifted, conversations quieted, heads turned. She stopped right in front of me, looked me dead in the eye, and smiled. Not friendly. Victorious. "Grace," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I think it's time someone told you the truth. David and I are together. Have been for months." She paused, letting that sink in. "It's over between you two. He's just been too kind to tell you himself. You should step aside with some dignity while you still can." The ballroom went silent. I could hear the moment phones came out, the soft clicks of cameras capturing what would be tomorrow's gossip. Whispers started at the edges of the room. I felt every eye on me, waiting. waiting to see the black wife break down. Get loud. Make a scene that would confirm every stereotype they'd ever held about women who looked like me. I looked at David, waiting for him to stand up, to tell her she was crazy, to defend our marriage, our 10 years, everything we'd supposedly built together. He just sat there, guilty but relieved, like he was glad he didn't have to hide anymore. That's when Marcus spoke up from across the table, that smirk still on his face. Maybe it's for the best, Grace. Let them be happy. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't just an affair coming to light. This was coordinated, calculated. They'd planned this, the public humiliation, the dismissal, the expectation that I'd crumble and disappear quietly. They wanted me gone, and they thought shame would be enough to make me leave without asking questions. They thought I'd be too hurt to think clearly, too embarrassed to fight back, too concerned with saving face to look deeper. They were so wrong. I stood up slowly, deliberately, picked up my clutch with hands that didn't shake even though my world was crumbling. I smiled, not at Mabel, but through her, and turned to the table. "Thank you, Mabel, for your honesty," I said, my voice steady and clear. Then I looked at David. "You'll be hearing from my attorney." I walked toward the exit with my head high, my spine straight, my gold dress catching the light from those crystal chandeliers. I felt every eye on me, heard the whispers growing louder, saw the cameras following my exit, recording this moment for social media, for gossip columns, for everyone who'd watched the millionaire's wife get publicly humiliated. The walk to the door felt like miles. My heels clicked against marble floors. The string quartet had stopped playing. By the time I reached the lobby, I could hear the roar of conversation resuming behind me, everyone talking about what they'd just witnessed. I made it to my car in the parking garage before I let myself breathe. Sat in the driver's seat with the door closed and the engine off. But I wasn't crying. I wasn't breaking down. I was calculating. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted folder. 4 months of documentation. 8 million reasons why this wasn't just about a divorce. They wanted me to disappear quietly, to step aside with dignity, like Mabel said, to fade into the background while they moved on with their lives and their crimes. Instead, I was about to make sure they disappeared completely. I drove home on autopilot, my hands steady on the wheel even as my mind raced through transaction records instead of tears. By morning, video of my humiliation would be everywhere. Social media, gossip sites, maybe even local news. The millionaire's wife publicly replaced. I didn't care. Let them talk. Let them think they'd broken me. I had bigger plans than nursing a broken heart. The penthouse was dark and empty when I arrived. David wouldn't be coming home tonight, probably celebrating his freedom with Mabel. Good. I needed space to work. I walked straight past our bedroom, past the kitchen, into my home office. I stripped off the gold dress, changed into leggings and a sweater, and made a pot of coffee. This would be a long night. I opened my encrypted files and spread everything across my desk. 4 months of documentation, printed transaction records, spreadsheets color-coded by suspicion level. I started cross-referencing dates. Every late night at the office, David claimed matched a suspicious wire transfer. Every emergency meeting aligned with a fraudulent invoice approval. The pattern wasn't just clear, it was glaring. The phantom distributor network was sophisticated. I'd give them that. Shell corporations registered in Delaware and Nevada, states known for lax oversight. MedSupply Solutions, LLC. Pharmaceutical Distribution Partners, Incorporated Healthcare Logistics Group. Professional-sounding names attached to addresses that led nowhere. I'd traced each one. Mailbox stores in strip malls. Vacant office buildings. One was literally an empty lot in Reno. They had basic websites, stock photos, generic copy about quality medical supplies, but no actual operations. No employees. No warehouse facilities. No evidence they'd ever delivered a single product. I followed the money trail transaction by transaction. David's company would pay inflated invoices, $200 for supplies worth $50, $500 for equipment that cost $150. The payments would wire to these phantom distributors' accounts. Then, within 48 hours, the money would move again. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the Bahamas, Switzerland. Accounts that, when I traced the registration documents I'd photographed from David's office, led back to 3 names: David Mitchell, Marcus Williams, and, surprisingly, Mabel Hayes. Mabel wasn't just the mistress. She was the inside operator. As executive assistant, she had access to accounts payable. Her digital signature appeared on dozens of fraudulent purchase orders. Her employee ID processed the inflated invoices. Email trails I'd pulled from the company server showed coordination with Marcus, approved the Patterson invoice, processed the Henderson payment, updated inventory reports as discussed. Her authorization codes were all over the fraudulent transactions. But it wasn't just fake vendors. They were diverting real inventory too. Legitimate pharmaceutical shipments that should have gone to hospitals and clinics were being rerouted and sold on secondary markets. Marcus, as CFO, manipulated the inventory databases to cover the missing stock. False reports showed products delivered when they'd actually been diverted for profit. Over 4 years, thousands of units. Medications that should have helped patients instead lined their pockets. I ran the numbers 3 times to be sure. Conservative estimate, $7.8 million stolen. More likely, $8.5 million when I factored in the inventory diversion. The timeline told its own story. It started 4 years ago, right after Marcus became CFO. Small amounts at first, $15,000 monthly. Then it accelerated after Mabel's hiring 14 months ago. By last quarter, they were stealing $150,000 monthly. David, company owner with final approval authority. Marcus, CFO manipulating financial records and inventory. Mabel, executive assistant processing fraudulent paperwork and apparently sleeping with the boss. Was the affair part of the plan? A way to push me out so I'd stop reviewing the financials? Or just a bonus for Mabel's cooperation? My professional assessment was clear. This wasn't creative accounting or aggressive tax strategy. This was federal crime. Wire fraud, they'd used electronic transfers across state lines. Money laundering, moving funds through shell corporations to hide origin. Pharmaceutical diversion, DEA jurisdiction. Embezzlement, falsifying business records. Tax evasion. Investor fraud, quarterly reports misrepresenting company financial health to shareholders. This wasn't about divorce anymore. This was about justice. Accountability. The right thing to do regardless of personal cost. I understood my position. I had access to evidence most whistleblowers could only dream of. I had professional expertise to interpret what I'd found. I had a moral obligation to report financial crimes when I discovered them. And as a cooperating witness, I'd have immunity protection. They couldn't touch me legally. But I'd destroy David's empire. Everything he'd built over 20 years would crumble. Our marriage would end not because his mistress said so, but because my husband was a criminal who'd chosen theft over integrity. I made peace with that choice in about 30 seconds. I started organizing documents by category. Wire fraud evidence, money laundering trails, inventory diversion records, false financial statements. I created a chronological timeline. I drafted a comprehensive evidence packet that any federal prosecutor would salivate over. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up my contacts. FBI White-Collar Crime Division. I had a former colleague there, someone I'd worked with on past cases. They wanted to erase me. Instead, I was about to expose them all. I started typing, "Agent Chen, I hope this email finds you well. I'm writing to report significant financial fraud that I've discovered." I woke after 3 hours of sleep to 47 missed calls from David. My phone was flooded, texts from friends asking if I was okay, notifications from social media where I'd been tagged in dozens of posts. The headlines were already up: Millionaire's wife publicly humiliated at charity gala. Video clips of Mabel's confrontation. Photos of me walking out. Commentary dissecting my expression, my dress, whether I'd known about the affair. I ignored all of it. I had work to do. At 8 a.m., I called Agent Sarah Chen at the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. We'd worked together years ago when I consulted on a securities fraud case. She was skeptical at first. Spurned wives often see crimes where there's only betrayal. But as I walked her through what I'd found, Her tone changed. Send me what you have. Encrypted. I want to see this before we talk further. By noon, I was in a conference room at the Federal Building. Agent Chen brought her team. I presented 4 years of evidence systematically: transaction records, shell company registrations, email trails, offshore account documentation. I watched their reactions shift from polite interest to genuine attention. One agent actually whistled when I showed them the inventory diversion scheme. How did you access all this? Chen asked. My husband gave me system credentials years ago when I helped build his financial infrastructure. Never revoked them. Everything I accessed was legal. They discussed whistleblower protections, immunity agreements, my role as a cooperating witness. Within an hour, they were looping in the DEA. Pharmaceutical diversion was their jurisdiction. The State Pharmacy Board. The IRS for tax evasion components. I sat in a coordination meeting with 5 different agencies, all of them building cases around the evidence I delivered. I also brought in James Patterson, a forensic accountant I'd worked with for years. I needed independent verification that I wasn't seeing patterns that didn't exist. James spent 2 days analyzing everything. His conclusion: Grace, this is slam dunk prosecution material. Better than slam dunk, they can't defend this. He'd found additional patterns I'd missed. The estimate climbed to $8.2 million. We built a comprehensive timeline. Every transaction matched to emails and texts between David, Marcus, and Mabel. Clear pattern and practice. Documented escalation. Evidence of intent, coordination, and conspiracy. Meanwhile, I met with Patricia Williams, a divorce attorney who specialized in high net worth cases. The criminal charges will affect everything, she explained. Asset forfeiture, seizure orders. But here's the strategy. Accept whatever lowball offer David makes. Let him think you're being reasonable. When the criminal case concludes, we'll get you what you're actually entitled to. David's attorney reached out within 48 hours of the gala. The settlement offer: $500,000 and an NDA. Stay quiet about the affair. Disappear quietly. Let them move on. I almost laughed at the amount. Instead, I played my role. I negotiated minor points, asking for $650,000, hemming and hawing, seeming hurt and hesitant. Finally, I reluctantly accepted the original $500,000. David actually called me personally to thank me for being reasonable about everything. I'm glad you're not making this ugly, Grace, he said, relief flooding his voice. I just want to move forward, I replied, the hurt wife personified. Inside, I was counting down the days until federal agents showed up at his door. I coordinated everything with the FBI. Divorce signing, Monday afternoon. Federal raids, Tuesday, 6 a.m. Everything timed for maximum impact. David would sign our divorce papers thinking he'd won. 12 hours later, his world would implode. Agents prepared search warrant applications. Prosecutors drafted charging documents. I provided last-minute details, where David kept backup files, which employees might cooperate, Marcus's home address. I moved my personal items out of the penthouse while David was at the office. Opened new bank accounts in my name only. Started preparing for life after. Packing my things, I found photos from our early years. Love letters David had written when we were first married. For a moment, grief hit me, not for who he was, but for who I'd thought he was. But resolve followed quickly. This was the right thing regardless of personal cost. I called my mother Friday night. Mom, something's about to happen. It's going to be all over the news. I need you to trust that I did what was right. She asked questions I couldn't fully answer yet, but I heard the pride in her voice when she said, I trust you, baby. I always have. Friday night, I checked into a hotel suite downtown. I stood at the window overlooking the city, David's company building visible in the distance. Lights still on in the executive offices where he probably sat, thinking he'd gotten away with everything. I reviewed my evidence packet one last time. No second thoughts. Only certainty. Monday, I'd sign away our marriage. Tuesday, I'd sign away his freedom. By Wednesday, they'd all know, you should never underestimate a black woman with receipts. Monday morning, I woke before dawn. I chose a navy power suit, conservative, professional, armor for the performance ahead. Minimal jewelry. Hair pulled back. I looked in the mirror and saw exactly what I wanted David to see, the dignified wife accepting defeat gracefully. My phone buzzed. Agent Chen, everything confirmed for 6 a.m. tomorrow. Stay safe. I was ready. The attorney's office was downtown, neutral territory. David was already there when I arrived, sitting beside his lawyer in the conference room. He looked tired, guilt etched in the lines around his eyes, but mostly he looked relieved. Like a man who'd been carrying a heavy secret and could finally put it down. Mabel wasn't there. Even David understood that would be inappropriate. Marcus wasn't there either, which was unusual since he typically attended anything business-related. I walked in with Patricia, my attorney, and sat across from him. Patricia let me lead. This was my show. Let's review the terms, I said, my voice steady. The settlement, $500,000, laughably low considering what was coming. An NDA regarding the affair and our marriage. Clean break, no ongoing spousal support. Division of personal property. I was taking very little. Just my clothes, some books, a few pieces of art I'd bought myself. David tried small talk. How have you been, Grace? Let's just get through this, I replied, not unkindly. Just tired. The wounded wife who wanted it over. His relief was palpable. He'd expected anger, tears, demands. Instead, I was making it easy. His attorney rushed through the paperwork, clearly eager to finalize before I changed my mind. I signed each page deliberately. My signature ending 10 years of marriage. David signed with visible relief, his shoulders dropping, tension leaving his body. Our attorneys witnessed the documents. Patricia slid the executed copies across the table. Grace, David said as we stood to leave. Can we talk? Just for a minute? Privately. I glanced at Patricia. She nodded slightly. I followed David into an empty conference room and closed the door. I really am sorry, Grace, he said, and I could hear genuine regret in his voice. You deserved better than this. Than how it ended. I hope you can move on and be happy. He paused, then added, Thank you for being reasonable about everything. I know this could have been ugly. I looked at him, this man I'd loved, built a life with, believed in. I'm just ready to move forward with my life, David. I hope you get everything you deserve. He didn't catch the double meaning. He just smiled, relieved. Thank you, Grace. That means a lot. Inside, I was screaming. I wanted to tell him what was coming. I wanted to watch his face when he realized. But I maintained my composure, my poker face perfect. We walked out together. David left first, his attorney congratulating him on the clean divorce as they headed to the elevator. Patricia and I remained behind, gathering our things slowly. You should win an Oscar, Patricia said quietly, a slight smile on her lips. Tomorrow's the real performance, I replied. Back at my hotel suite, I got the final confirmation call from Agent Chen. Everything set for 6 a.m. Multiple agencies coordinated. Warrants signed by a federal judge. Arrest teams briefed. You stay clear, wait for my call. Understood. I spent the afternoon preparing. I called my employer at the investment firm, gave them a heads up that news would break tomorrow. Their response, You did the right thing, Grace. We're proud of you. I reached out to my mother and closest friends, preparing them for the media storm about to hit. For the first time since the gala, I let myself actually feel everything. Grief that my marriage was truly over. Pride that I was standing for what was right. Anxiety about the public scrutiny ahead. But mostly, resolve. This was worth it. All of it. Then I did something unexpected. I called David. He answered on the second ring, surprise in his voice. Grace. I wanted to say goodbye properly, I said. Our marriage is over, but I hope you remember the good times. Take care of yourself, David. There was a long pause. Thank you, Grace. That means a lot. You're a good woman. I'm sorry I forgot that. Goodbye, David. I hung up with finality. No guilt. No second thoughts. He'd had every opportunity to choose differently, to be honest, to be good. He'd chosen crime and betrayal instead. Tomorrow, he'd face the consequences. I was awake at 5:45 a.m., coffee already brewed, sitting by the hotel window watching the sun rise over the city. At exactly 6 a.m., my phone rang. "We're in," Agent Chen said. "All 4 locations secured." Federal agents had executed warrants simultaneously at David's company headquarters, our former penthouse, Marcus's home, and Mabel's apartment. Coordinated timing to prevent evidence destruction. By 6:30 a.m., the local news had helicopters over the company building. Breaking: federal raid on Mitchell Pharmaceuticals. Sources say fraud investigation. I watched on my laptop as agents carried boxes of evidence out, employees standing in the parking lot looking confused and scared. My phone started ringing. "David, 6 calls in 15 minutes. I didn't answer. Then came the text, "Grace, what did you do?" Another, "Answer your phone." At 7:30, "You destroyed everything." I blocked his number. Marcus called from jail later that morning. I answered that one. "You vindictive bitch," he screamed. "You're destroying families. My kids watched me get arrested." "No, Marcus," I said calmly. "You destroyed families when you stole $8 million. Every investor you defrauded. Every employee whose pension you risked. You did that. I just documented it. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is not seeing it sooner." I hung up and blocked him too. Mabel sent a text, probably through her lawyer, "Please call regarding federal charges." I deleted it without responding. The U.S. attorney held a press conference at 1 p.m. The charges were extensive. David facing wire fraud, money laundering, embezzlement, tax evasion, up to 18 years. Marcus looking at 12 for conspiracy and falsifying records. Mabel staring down 8 years for her role in processing fraudulent transactions. All of David's assets were frozen. The penthouse, the cars, the vacation homes, everything seized by federal authorities pending forfeiture proceedings. The company's stock was suspended. The board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove David as CEO. Investors filed lawsuits. Business partners cut ties. Everything he'd built over 20 years crumbled in a single day. That evening, despite having blocked David's number, I sent him one final message from a different phone. "You asked what I did. I did my job. I found fraud and reported it, just like I was trained to do. You destroyed yourself, David. I just documented it." Then I turned off my phone and ordered room service. For the first time in months, I actually ate a full meal. The bail hearings were brutal. David's was set at $2 million. Prosecution argued flight risk because of his offshore accounts. His family scraped together the money, using every asset they had. He was released that evening but confined to his mother's house with an ankle monitor. Marcus got $1.5 million bail. He posted it using his home as collateral, his wife sobbing in the courtroom, their children kept home from school to avoid the media. Mabel couldn't make her $500,000 bail. She remained in federal custody, a public defender assigned to her case. My identity was now fully public. Headlines everywhere: forensic accountant wife exposes husband's fraud. My LinkedIn was flooded. Some messages were supportive, "You're a hero." Others were vicious, "You destroyed him over an affair." I held a brief press conference with Patricia. I wore the same Navy suit, stood at a podium, and made a short statement. I discovered evidence of criminal activity and reported it to the appropriate authorities. This was not about my marriage. It was about justice and protecting innocent investors and employees who were being defrauded. I didn't take questions. Just walked away from the cameras with my head high. The reaction from the black community was overwhelming. #Black Excellence trended on social media. Think pieces about my professionalism, about black women's invisible labor, about how David had benefited from my expertise while dismissing my worth. I became an unexpected symbol, which was both gratifying and uncomfortable. David's family claimed I was vindictive. His mother gave interviews, "She's destroying him over an affair." Marcus's wife blamed me for ruining their children's lives. Some former friends took sides. But my professional colleagues were universally supportive. The investment firm where I worked issued a statement. We're proud of Grace Mitchell's integrity and commitment to ethics. 3 days after the arrests, Marcus flipped. Facing 20 years, he cut a cooperation deal with prosecutors. He gave them everything: detailed testimony against David, confirmation of the offshore accounts, admission of his central role. His betrayal of David was complete and swift. Mabel took a plea deal, 5 years in exchange for testimony. She admitted she'd known it was fraud from the beginning. Revealed that David had promised her a future once I was out of the picture. Her tearful allocution was broadcast on the news. I watched, unmoved. The asset forfeiture process began. Federal prosecutors contacted Patricia about my marital property rights. Because I was a cooperating witness and the fraud had been concealed from me, I was entitled to my share of legitimate marital assets, everything David owned before the scheme started, plus my own earnings and investments. The final calculation, approximately $14.2 million. I established a fund to help displaced Mitchell Pharmaceuticals employees, donating $500,000 for my settlement. Some of them had lost everything through no fault of their own. My employer offered me a promotion. Senior Director of Forensic Accounting, specializing in fraud detection and whistleblower cases. I accepted. My new office had a corner view of the city, including David's now dark, empty company building. 2 weeks after the raids, I moved into a new apartment. Smaller than the penthouse, but mine. I decorated it with my own taste, my own choices. No ghosts of David. No memories of betrayal. Just a fresh start. I also started therapy. Processing not just the betrayal but everything else. My identity beyond being David's wife, the grief of losing what I'd thought my life was, the weight of the choices I'd made. My therapist helped me see that I was never a victim. I was always a fighter who'd chosen justice over comfort. 6 months later, David's trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day of testimony, sitting in the public gallery with Patricia beside me. Marcus testified against him, admitting everything. Mabel testified too, her voice small and scared, so different from the confident woman who'd stood at that gala. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, I listened to victim impact statements. An elderly investor who'd lost his retirement savings. A single mother whose pension had been raided. A small pharmacy owner who'd been overcharged for supplies. The judge's words were measured but firm. Mr. Mitchell, you betrayed trust on every level, personal, professional, and public. Your crimes weren't victimless. They destroyed lives. 18 years in federal prison. David gave a brief statement before sentencing, apologizing to investors and employees. He didn't mention me specifically. His voice broke when he said, "I lost everything that mattered." I felt nothing. No sympathy. Just closure. In the courthouse hallway afterward, our eyes met briefly. He was being led away in handcuffs. I turned and walked in the opposite direction. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked. Like a chapter is finally closed. 3 months after David's sentencing, I was at the courthouse for a civil hearing related to investor restitution. I saw Mabel in the hallway, prison uniform, handcuffs, a guard beside her. She looked small, tired, defeated. Our eyes met for one brief second. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The message was clear. You came for the wrong woman. I walked away without looking back. David sent me letters from prison. Multiple letters over the months. I never opened any of them. Patricia asked if I wanted to read them. He said everything that mattered when he sat silent at that gala, I told her. Some things don't deserve attention. Now, a year after that night at the Ritz, my life looks completely different. I wake up in my own apartment, sunlight streaming through windows that face east. I make coffee on my balcony, looking at the city skyline. My calendar shows client meetings, foundation work, a speaking engagement at a forensic accounting conference. I check my email. A new referral from another attorney, a woman who discovered her politician husband's corruption. I schedule an initial consultation. I look at myself in the mirror. Not Mrs. Mitchell. Not David's wife. Just Grace, forensic accountant, advocate, survivor. The woman who turned pain into purpose. Who used evidence as her weapon. who refuse to be erased or diminished. I've established the Mitchell Foundation, supporting women who uncover financial crimes. We provide legal support, financial assistance, counseling. We help whistleblowers who risk everything to do the right thing. It's my way of ensuring other women don't face what I faced alone. I'm helping 5 women now. Maya, discovering her CEO husband's insider trading. Patricia, finding her business partner's tax fraud. Jasmine, uncovering hidden assets in her divorce. Each one reminds me of myself. I teach them my methodology, documentation, patience, strategic thinking. Evidence speaks louder than emotion, I tell them. Last month, I was at a coffee shop near the courthouse when a woman approached me. "Are you Grace Mitchell?" I braced for judgment or curiosity. Instead, she said, "You saved my family. We'd invested with David's company. Your courage to come forward meant we got some money back through the restitution process." She hugged me, tears in her eyes. That's when I understood the full impact of what I'd done. It wasn't just about David, Marcus, and Mabel. It was about every person they'd harmed, every victim they'd created. My case prompted regulatory reforms. Pharmaceutical distribution oversight increased. New whistleblower protections passed. I testified before a congressional committee. Industry publications cite my case as a turning point. I also made a choice I never expected. 6 months after David's sentencing, I visited him in federal prison. My decision, my terms. The visiting room was sterile, monitored, depressing. David appeared in prison uniform, aged beyond his years, humbled in a way I'd never seen. "I didn't think you'd ever come," he said. "I needed to see you. Not for you, for me. I'm sorry, Grace. I know that's not enough. You're right. It's not. But I accept it." We talked for 30 minutes. He asked if I'd ever loved him. I told him I'd loved who I thought he was. He said he'd loved me, that it was real. I replied, "Then you should have chosen differently." Before I left, I told him, "I didn't come to forgive you. I came to tell you that I've moved on. You have 17 years left in here to think about your choices. I have the rest of my life to live mine. What you took from me, trust, years, peace, I've rebuilt. What I took from you, freedom, reputation, empire, you can't rebuild. We're not even. Justice isn't about being even. It's about being right." He nodded slowly. "You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. I thought you were just the pretty, smart woman beside me. I didn't realize you were the foundation I was standing on. When I pushed you away, everything collapsed." His final words, "I hope you find happiness, Grace. Real happiness." "I already have," I said. "Goodbye, David." I walked out of that prison, breathed deeply in the parking lot, and drove away from that chapter of my life permanently. Today, exactly 1 year after the gala, I'm hosting a dinner party. My team from work, close friends, family. We toast not to revenge but to resilience. Someone asks, "Do you ever regret it?" Regret doing the right thing? Never. I regret the years I didn't see the truth. But I don't regret bringing it to light. The impact has been real. 3 marriages saved by wives who learned from my story. 5 fraud schemes exposed by inspired whistleblowers. 12 women entering forensic accounting because of me. My foundation helping over 30 victims of financial crimes. As the sun sets, I stand on my balcony watching city lights reflect my journey. From humiliation to vindication. From wife to independent woman. Never a victim, always a fighter. My phone rings. Another new client. "Grace Mitchell, how can I help you?" A woman's voice, shaking but determined. "I found something in my husband's files. I think he's stealing from his company." "Tell me everything," I say. "And don't worry, we'll document it all." I smile, knowing another woman is about to find her power. Mabel said, "It's over," like she was ending something. She was right. It was over, for David's lies, Marcus's betrayal, her own delusions. But for me, it wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of becoming who I was always meant to be. For every woman who's ever been told to step aside, to be quiet, to disappear, you're not decorative. You're not disposable. You're not done. You're the storm they never saw coming. And baby, when you rain, you pour. Epilogue **. David Mitchell is currently serving his 18-year sentence at FCI Butner. Marcus Williams was released after 6 years for cooperation. He works in restaurant management. Mabel Hayes served 4 years, released on good behavior, location unknown. Grace Mitchell continues her work as Senior Director of Forensic Accounting. The Mitchell Foundation has helped over 200 whistleblowers and victims of financial crimes. She has never remarried but says she's never been happier. When asked about her story, she simply says, "I did what anyone with integrity should do. I told the truth." Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting everything you deserve.